So you're just doing constant, just
Yep.
massive AoE damage.
I'm doing this on alpha next week. Who? All right.
Yeah, it's gonna slap an AoE man on. I can't wait.
You're here at least. All right. I'm just gonna call this, and whoever calls, whoever answers can answer. I'm just gonna say, no one has to join this. Just some conversation if you're down. I think only you are here right now, Taeznak. So I'll probably just put your name on the screen real quick. First of all, are you
Yeah,
excited? By the way, do you like the post?
yeah. The tree's looking way better. Lots of really cool and interesting things, and the only like there's a couple pain points still, but it's way better than it was.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, yeah, there's definitely gonna be pain points. This is also like I think so interesting that there wasn't a post for Death Knights over the last couple weeks, and like Death Knights definitely similar to like the Power Word update. We're like, yo, we've gotten like a big post already, but like it's been a minute since you said this stuff was gonna get implemented. I definitely hasn't been too long, but I definitely started hearing like DKs kind of come out of the woodwork and be like, yo, I think we're kind of a class that isn't getting a lot of stuff done as well. But I think it makes sense in a way, right? Because like I don't think they could have been doing like utility catch-up posts on Unholy because there's just so many new things, right? It's just like I feel like it kind of just all had to be released at once. It just kind of goes to show a difference in like design style.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, my theory is the developer was on vacation for a little bit and then did a bunch of work and then finally updated us, but it's looking great. Yeah, did you want the class tree or the unholy tree first?
I think we definitely start with the class tree because then it'll have some like blood integration as well. I just think I briefly looked at it. I haven't pathed it at all, but it looked like I think one of the main things they did that was insane too is the class tree before had such like hard line like left, middle, and right nodes, and they combined all of that, and I think that is
Yeah.
insane. The thing is, a lot of it we'll go through and talk about the actual nodes, and I can open up your thing in a second. But specifically, Death Knights had a couple of bad things at the bottom. You were also an older tree, and in old trees, they had like a big hard-on for 3-point nodes. The biggest interesting thing that I saw in all of this actually is that his fundamental like 3-point nodes are bad, they're gone. I think this is what a lot of people in the community have been saying, but it seems like, and I imagine this will translate to all other trees as well because, like I said, even though a lot of these trees are largely developed by one person as far as like leading the charge of it, their whole work style is like deeply collaborative and filled with peer review. So if they come to conclusions, they're usually brought up by everyone, right? So I think that's like this is a kind of leaning into a big philosophy change with all the trees in general.
Yeah, I can definitely agree there. And 3-point nodes mostly just feel like, I don't know, a way to block you out on other stuff because you had too many points.
I feel like with the older trees as well, you are much less likely to see passives and abilities baseline. You have to pay a talent point for every single one. So I was kind of wondering if they're going to shift away from that a little bit with Death Knights, but we don't have too much of a shift away from that right now.
Well, they did a fair amount of that with Unholy, right? They changed the Epidemic node, the Scourge Strike node, and the Death Coiled node all baseline and just removed all three of them. And they were both like 2-point talents, right? Or all three of them?
Yeah, for the most part.
What are other like some highlights of this that are pretty cool?
I mean, there's a lot of really cool highlights for the general tree. The improved Death Strike moving's easily the biggest one. Like, such quality of life. A bomb in PvE now is so great.
Yeah, it looks like it's pretty easy to get. Yeah, that's the one thing too is that wait, can with the new change, can you get all three capstones?
Sadly, no, you're
No.
1 point short.
I think that's probably on purpose because that's don't you all think that's like a lot of what a lot of the 3-point nodes were eventually made to do, especially near the bottom of the tree? It seemed like a lot of them were just like they just saw it as a solution to making sure you can't get every capstone.
Yeah, pretty much. And the way it's set up now just feels better for that purpose.
Especially because other things in the capstone level for the DK tree are also very good, right? It's
Yeah,
like the capstone level stuff isn't necessarily the star of the show. There's like a lot of stuff down there that's like pretty powerful.
I was gonna say it just makes it super easy to switch between like A bomb and Soul Reaper for AoE and single target too, because you're taking those 2 points anyway. You just literally swap where you spend that last point.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be so easy for A bombs for any DK you ever bring to have A bomb slim. Although I do think there is like a bigger conversation to have about raid buffs with DKs near the end of this post because this is a big. This is like I feel like there's not a lot left unsaid with this post. This was like a month in the making and a lot all at once, and it is a lot of information. But DKs still have a big question about like you know, almost every class in the game has a required raid spot. A DK is still like this niche thing, and that's only existing for like 2 classes at the moment. So it's almost like if you're gonna go all the way there, you know, you could make it so one of every class is good, but also grip is just this like extremely feast or famine thing. But we'll kind of get into that later. I still think that's something that needs to be talked about because they would have brought that up. This seems like they just laid it all out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me, you linked me the paste bin. Let me grab the paste bin for this class tree, and let's just kind of, we'll probably be able to talk about the changes. The reason why I don't want to highlight things in the post necessarily is because I feel like going down the class tree will actually allow us to see that on our own. Like, we will be able to path through them and talk about where things are differently compared. You know, before you, like, kind of had to take your stuff to go through here to get IBF, so you're taking Chains of Ice as an Unholy DK, Mind Freeze, and then let's just say Permafrost for now, but everyone understands the scenarios where you would take Anticipation or Blinding Sleet, I guess, just to kind of get IBF. Kind of same thing in the middle. To get AMS and to get the thing you'll likely use for AMS, you have to grab Death Strike, even though I'm pretty sure you'd always have it. Stamina node, too strong, and then I think, did old Unholy DK go all the way through this stuff on the right just to get this, or were they able to skip it? I actually don't even remember.
You would go through Brittle, but only because the points weren't really needed.
Yeah, because you like go through the middle here and you kind of get down to Assimilation, then it's just like 3 points remaining. Okay, well, if we have to kind of get down through there, you just send it.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then it's currently skipping on 2% strength. We'll talk, because this is like what it takes to unlock the capstone level, but you could just skip that by not taking Assimilation, grabbing strength, grabbing this. I took 2 points in here. I guess you might not be able to take Anti-Magic Barrier all the time. What else am I doing wrong? And then Unholy Ground. Would you interact with Unholy Ground as Unholy? I forget.
Not for single target now.
Yeah, so it's like going through this side of the tree is like kind of hard for Unholy in the old times, but I'll just kind of keep it consistent. Just Will the Necropolis for whatever reason. Unholy Bond. Oh wait, I took Leech. I took Leech for no reason. That's what it is. Makes sense. Grab that. Assuming Icy Talons and Empower and Room Weapon.
Yep, and then Runic Continuation and Rune Mastery.
Yeah. And I think we have 1 point remaining in the bottom of the tree, and that could be a Horn of Winter node, could be a Death's Echo node, or it could be anything up at the top, whatever. Not going to go super into it. Let's see how that changes kind of in the new tree for Unholy. And this is so the one thing people will notice more than anything else is the middle of this tree is so much more interconnected. You are not, and there's a couple of tangent nodes that just make way more sense. So Anti-Magic Zone going straight into Assimilation makes total sense, right? It's something that you can avoid entirely and grab a personal instead of it. You're not kind of forced into it to path to the bottom of the tree for any specs. Let's just kind of see how that goes. So just using the same thought process of getting the things you need. You still grab Chains of Ice, Mind Freeze, Permafrost, and IBF, just to kind of get to IBF. That same thought process still kind of aligns. It's just more, and then the IBF node is directly under, which is good. Let's grab AMS. Skip the Anti-Magic Barrier, could be fight dependent, I suppose. And then just grab Veteran of the Third War, which unlocks the second tree. And then now let's see what actually changes here. You guys can jump in at any moment too.
Don't forget to look at that node on the right next to the Anti-Magic Barrier. There you go.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, this is basically a 1 point node that I believe is it as strong as the old 3 point node used to be?
I don't believe it is. We don't have a whole lot of information. I believe it's just going to be the runic power cost reduction and
the
10%.
First level of it.
Yeah.
They didn't give us
meet-
the full details on these things.
And they might meet somewhere in the middle, and like maybe give you the 2 point value of the healing increase, but keep the same cost as the 1 level, or I guess all 3 levels. And they moved Death Pact down to the middle of the tree and kind of removed it from this giant, like, convoluted stuff at the beginning where there was just kind of too many points to spend up here, which was nice. And they allowed you to, you know, get a defensive instead of utility to kind of path down the tree. Before, like, this decision after AMZ was, do I get a stun or do I get movement? Something that is not necessarily, but like defense, they're both like usable, but like utility in different situations. And they kind of just gave you a defensive there as an option to lead into Wraithwalk. And Wraithwalk is just such a better mid-tier capstone than Assimilation ever was, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's grab AMZ in most scenarios. Probably going to want to path and grab the IBF cooldown, the crit. This is Unholy, so we don't have to worry about 2-target Cold Heart. Runic Attenuation right under that. Runic Attenuation moved into the mid-tier, leading right into Runic. I think you have to shift-click it. Yeah, control-click it, that's it. into Runic Empowerment near the bottom. I think another thing to talk about too while we're here though is I think they should definitely like look at Runic Corruption, right?
Yeah, they should really look at runic corruption, even runic empowerment. That node in general just creates a lot of issues, especially when we're looking at the baseline for Unholy and Frost. If they choose not to go down there, they'd be crazy not to. But if somebody does, they're stuck with like 50% downtime for those specs, and it just creates a lot of issues.
Yeah, and and also just I'll use it on the left side here because it's easier to actually navigate and look at. But like you're choosing two things on this node when you're trying to do choice nodes for other classes, and some classes have done it right and some have done it wrong. I'll use Mage for an example. Mage is a class that I think has actually done this really well, as much as Mage is flawed in other ways. At the bottom of their tree, they're choosing between Giga Combustion or a shorter cooldown Combustion. This is a real choice. This could apply in different scenarios, and if tuned well, both would be relevant based on the encounter, and you would constantly interact with this decision. It's not necessarily a tuning thing. Where they did Hunters, the opposite. Marksman at the bottom of their tree has the CDR kindling aspect leading into the next thing, and then at the last part, you have two things that are not really a choice. The answer is always just whatever does more damage. They both interact with True Shot, but not in like a meaningfully interesting way where it would make True Shot better in a certain scenario. One's just kind of always going to be better than the other one. That's the same issue as Runic Corruption. Also, I know a bunch of mages are going to pop off about this. We've had the conversation about this for a long time. They're looking at current mage and how that feels bad because currently you have both of those things. They have not done the tuning thing yet to make that decision make sense, but the decision itself is all about design. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today with Unholy. I think at this point, you don't want to worry as much about the current tuning of like how things are and just kind of slapping the talents on top of them, because the whole process of tuning things for how they're supposed to be for these trees with so many things changing just has not happened yet. So that right now, that talent for mage is like, mages are like, no, we used to have something we used to have and now we don't have it. It's more that the decision and the choice is cool. The fact that you can double down and go in either directions, they just haven't tuned that yet. Okay, where were we for this? So I don't know if there's any other thought to this other than like, what could be a choice on a rune node? So there's two choices. There's make Runic Corruption much more powerful and better for specific specs, right? Because you've always kind of chosen it on the talent row, right? But like, what can you do to Runic Corruption besides just buffing the shit out of it to where it's actually an interesting decision?
There is one situation that you could create where runic corruption could be better in some scenarios than runic empowerment. That would be uncoupling its duration from haste. So right now its duration is 3 seconds reduced by haste. So it always generates the same number of runes all the time, 0.9 runes. If they decoupled that from haste, just static 3 seconds, at a point you would have enough haste where you could actually use it and it would be better than runic empowerment. Don't know if that's enough, but it might make it interesting enough for where gearing decisions are more leading your choice there.
Okay, good. So it's better than it was this expansion. Cool. Go ahead.
I mean, not really, because it's still reduced by haste right now, but that's how they could do it.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah. The only thing I have pathing down towards the middle is if you ever don't want to take AMS, on this side you have to take Asphyxiate, which is just baseline way less powerful in PvE at least than Death Pact. In most cases, like Asphyxiate is like pretty situational, and Death Pact is kind of always relevant, even though it's typically just been skipped over, but not because Death Pact was ever a bad button. It was just because you had to choose between other things that were more powerful. But as a well-pathed 1-point node, Death Pact is certainly good. So I wonder kind of how you're going to navigate the middle of this tree, because I think it needs to be said, at least in Raid, that there are fights where you cannot take AMZ. Just because the power level just kind of isn't high enough for a DPS player in its current iteration. What do you guys think about that?
I'm on the boat of you'd probably skip it, go through the strength node, Might of Polastrian, and down through Death Pact into Wraithwalk. It does cost you a little bit on the right side of the tree because you're going through a couple nodes you don't really need, like Enfeeble, but overall should generally just be a better situation than taking AMZ where you don't need it.
Yeah. Because that just, I don't know, this whole thing just kind of, but at least you can skip it though, right? Like before it was not really an option to do that. Like there was some really good stuff under it. Like if you wanted Wraithwalk, you kind of had to go through this. You could skip it though. But yeah, now at least the interconnectivity in the middle just makes it a bit easier to path. I know you didn't add the icons for them because it was kind of impossible, but they did add the Lichborn node right under the, it's actually a buffed version of the current conduit, right?
Yeah, slightly buffed version of the current conduit, but at a 2 point cost, I'm not sure it's very attractive. Maybe for PvP, but I don't know.
Yeah, there is kind of a lot you have to go through to kind of get to the bottom still, but at least it's like I think Lichborn is absolutely very situational. DKs are living a first class life where you could, there are some classes in the game where if there's a 2 point option anywhere in their tree to get a 15% DR on use for 12 seconds and increasing leech, like you would just, I mean, that's like you have to take this, right? Not too many classes that have to take it, but like a decent amount would. But DKs just having Death Strike, shorter AMS, access to Death Pact through good pathing, it's just absolutely something you could do without unless you're actually using it to get out of fears. Now, specifically PvE, I imagine in PvP, you probably take this a lot. Let me see what else we kind of have to go through. So right now, just skipping AMZ, getting most of the throughput stuff. We have unlocked the bottom of the tree, I believe, or we're close to it. And if anything, it's like we're 1 point off. That's not good. Is there a better way to path this, or have I kind of made too many decisions I didn't need to? I kind of baseline chose IBF as like 1 minute shorter cooldown. I guess that's not necessarily something you always need, but would kind of feel bad to not have, right?
Yeah, I think the one extra point you need is just going to go to anti-magic barrier, honestly, just below AMS.
And then
Add or
this,
improved death strike if you need it.
yeah. And then also just the other thing I was thinking is we're also 2 points removed up here away from actually having all 3 ways to path down, but that really only matters if you specifically want Death's Echo. However, that is a very powerful option in a lot of content, so we'll kind of talk about what you need to do to get that and drop. So currently, let's just kind of spend the acclamation point there, and now we have the bottom tree unlocked with, I believe, a full level to look at here. This is, I think we have all points. Oh, okay, whatever. Well, let me unspec Wraithwalk. Yeah, we can, okay, so we have exactly 20. So we have the rest of the points to go here. So for Unholy DK, I'm assuming you're going, oh, they made Will a 2-pointer as well. Horn of Winter, Icy Talons, Empower, Blood Draw. Still, I'm assuming you guys feel the same way I do about this. It just seems kind of niche. The fact that it like look at everything else on this row. Will the Necropolis, Death's Echo, Horn of Winter, Blood Draw. It seems like one thing is out of place.
Definitely agree
a
with
very
you.
satisfying pickup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we already got the sims ready for it, and it's like 40 DPS single target. Like, not great.
Like every other option here feels great to path through. I guess the reality is in a lot of scenarios, I think you're taking you're going through here and you can path around it. But I mean, obviously that's not always the best solution to something being there. So obviously that would need to result in like a buff or maybe a rework or rethink. And then now you are 1 point off of getting every single capstone, but you can get everything but them. But I think that's fine, right? Like the idea of capstones is that you have 3 very powerful things that you could realistically choose 2 of any of the 3 of them in a lot of content, and it makes sense. I think they've absolutely achieved that. I think there's a scenario you drop A-Bomb's Limb and grab Soul Reaper. What do you guys think about that? What they did with the capstone level of this tree?
I think that might be true for every spec but Frost, but Taeznak would know better than me on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's way more open now. I don't think Frost is ever going to not take A-Bomb, especially with the gameplay conflicts of Soul Reaper. So that'll kind of be locked, but Unholy has the freedom of choice. Blood has the freedom of choice. You can kind of take whatever, but every spec's kind of locked into Empower Rune Weapon anyway, so it's more a choice between A-Bomb or Soul Reaper.
Okay, so they're getting a lot of the so before you had to spend all these points in the bottom, and it looks like you got a lot of the same stuff. It just allows you to get a second capstone. With still getting all the Unholy Bond. So a little bit more choice. The only issue is, if you're an Unholy or a Blood DK, what are you doing here to get Death's Echo? What do you have to drop to grab the new thing they've added in this expansion that is something that I could absolutely see a raid fight where a DK is brought to be a Death Knight, where this is almost a borderline requirement?
Taz, you want to go first?
Yeah, I guess I can. So it's going to require a lot of defensive losses and a lot of movement losses. You're going to give up your IBF cooldown reduction. You're going to give up Wraithwalk. You're going to give up Death Pact. And that will... talent tree calculator's a little... Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, I'll do it.
But yeah, you got to give up those 3 nodes in order to be able to path down adequately to grab Death's Echo, which does make up for the movement loss of Wraithwalk a little bit by giving you the extra Death's Advance charge. But you're still losing out on some defensive capability because you're losing Death Pact as well. Or actually, I guess you can grab it.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a few things. I think the thing that feels the worst still in this tree is actually two things that happened at the very start. Not every okay. Let's look at the blood tree. No decision here is bad. For all three specs, Death Strike, all three specs insane. Anti-Magic's Shell, insane. Death's Advance, insane. And Anti-Magic Barrier, insane. And Improved Death Strike, insane. Every single choice, the way you want to path down to a baseline 10% stam increase, which is basically required, you have to you path through something that is good. These two nodes feel the opposite of that. The Frost one's a little bit better because Anticipation has, viability in a lot of forms of content. Permafrost is just kind of a passive absorb, not super powerful, not something you need. Certainly a way worse defensive than all the things you're considering losing to get Death's Echo, right? And you're doing that just to get to IBF. And really the only reason that decision appears to be there is because of lore, right? These are all Frost-related things. And they wanted to start it out with, Frost is cool and it's not Unholy and it's just off here and it's its own thing. And the other Unholy side deals with that even more, right? You're grabbing something that in a lot of scenarios, just to fill up points, you guys talked about, let's go back to the decision making you made near the top. Because you mentioned it like, well, we just kind of have to fill out points, so we have to do this. But you're going through multiple nodes that you don't really want to get to something that doesn't interact with it. These are issues that have been seen in a lot of trees, and you worked with it. So, like, you got to this point, you unlocked it. You're like, all right, where do we go from here? Probably the crit, runic attenuation, empowerment, sure. And then, like, you're pathing through the middle somehow. And then you're just like, well, we need X amount more points to go through. Why not just slam all this stuff that you don't really need just to get down and path to the capstone level, right? And I just feel like these things at the top are not made the same. The middle is not the same as the left and right. And I think that's where a lot of those bad decisions come from.
Yeah, definitely agree with you that and the middle tends to be the least spec specific as well. Those aren't things that are specifically blood themed. Like, you can't really say AMS is blood themed or Death's Advance is blood themed. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I don't know, just trying to segregate them has caused a lot of the issues we're seeing here. Trying to create a more dynamic tree where it's all interconnected, where you have a direct AoE path, you have a direct single target path, a little bit of in between. It would result in a better tree overall.
I wonder if there's a lot of individual ways to fix it, but even if you swapped IBF and this tangent node into the bottom mid or into the middle part of this tree and had something it just feels bad that IBF's required. You're gonna take IBF the whole expansion. It feels bad to path through things you don't want to ever get anything you want. Like monks just ran through this last week or a couple days ago, where every single spec of monk wants fortifying brew, but it was brought up endlessly in the class discussion that you have to take 2 points in paralysis is the only possible way to get fortifying brew. In my opinion, this is a bit more egregious than what's happening with Death Knights, but it's the same concept. Fundamentally, all of the trees have had decisions like this removed or changed with pathing, especially ones that have gotten more frequent updates. And again, they collaborate a lot as developers. I imagine those decisions were not come to by those individual people. They were come to by a group. So I think these are eventually changed. I just kind of wanted to point it out to that DK kind of has a little bit of that going on, and it makes sense why they came to that conclusion, right? It's very clearly Frost, Unholy on the right, and then Blood. But Blood is just so much more universal, and the other two feel really bad to path down at the beginning.
Just feels like they gave Blood all the defensive and utility stuff.
How does this tree look for Blood, Kyrasis? What is the what's the power level compared to before? Is it kind of a similar issue with decision making, or do you feel like it's a little bit better for Blood?
Things don't change too much for Blood. Before with Blood, we'd be pathing down Frost to Runic Empowerment, and then we'd actually generally path through Unholy Ground, which, as you were talking about earlier, what decisions Blood would have to make to take Death's Echo is not very much because we're already down there. It's just 1 point off at that point.
So you just kind of skip the stuff in the middle?
Yes. Unless you have a specific reason to pick up anything like Wraithwalk, for instance, or the stun, depending on what you were doing. Now, you do get 2 more talent points available because there's 3-point talents at the end of the tree. Became 2-point talents, but there are other changes to the tree that suck up those extra talent points, so we actually have a little bit less flexibility at the end of the day. I'll let you fill up this tree though first.
Yeah, I think I'm largely doing it right, but yeah, so it's like you would go down here, grab this stuff, maybe Death's Echo. I think you said only 1 point in improved Death Strike, if I remember previously, and then
if you're going for A-Bomb, you'd go all 3, obviously, but if you were going for some sort of Soul Reaper build, you'd still want 1 point in improved Death Strike.
Okay. Sure. So something like this, but I know that like there was some differing opinion within DKs of like whether you take just the reduction of this instead of the healing increase, or unless you needed to fully commit to A bomb. So how does that change with the with this class tree?
If you go over to the other calculator on the right, you're still going down the frost tree and the unholy tree midway down.
Oh, is there a one for blood here? I don't know if you can change your starting point.
Oh,
Sadly,
that's the
I
issue.
only
Well, we would take raised dead anyway, so it's not that big of a deal.
Oh, sure, then it doesn't matter. Yep. Okay, so
It's a good 1 point single target damage increase for blood, so why not?
so you do kind of the same thing, except your chain.
We're getting our stamina. If you want, you take AMZ, which I guess for a lot of things you would take that. Then Frost, just go all the way down. You got that choice, notice dependent circumstances. Just take Permafrost for now, I guess. Icebound Fortitude. Keep going down the Frost Rune. Continuation is very good. They lowered that in the tree, but we can talk about that a bit later. Now, if you have points to spare, we would just go all the way through the Undead node, or
Unholy Ground.
the Unholy nodes straight from like D&D Cleave all the way down to Brittle. Though, if you do need to spread out for more utility, we'd drop that and probably travel through the middle of the tree. But for now, let's just go through there.
I just hate this decision where every DK is like ignoring this Unholy side, and then they run out of points and they're like, oh, we'll slam it, and you just slam just the most meaningless 4 points of all time, and it's just to get somewhere else. I just feel like that has to be, and I don't know if maybe if they gave the middle of the tree a little bit of the same pathing love that, or the top of the tree the same pathing love they did to the middle, it would kind of feel a lot better.
Oh, one thing in the new tree in particular with blood early on in the tree, that improved Death Strike node, we're going to be taking that.
Okay.
That's going to be sucking up one of the extra talent points we get later on.
So if you're looking at my like shared screen, like where are you sending this down to get to the capstone level right now? Are you going?
We are going
strength?
down Unholy. We're going to take that 2% strength, then probably Long Grip or D&D Snare or Lichborn, depending on the situation, then Unholy Ground, because D&D is rotational and single target for blood DKs, so we like Unholy Ground to some extent.
Sure. And then I think there's a couple more points needed to path down. Some things notably that are missing is like the shorter AMS. That could certainly be situational. Death Pact and Wraithwalk, obviously.
And AMZ.
Yeah.
And if we want to get multiple of those options, we can drop that on those early points in Unholy and path through. Gets advanced to the Unholy side of the tree.
Yeah, see, it kind of feels bad, right? It seems like you're kind of leveraging a lot of the stuff you've had before. Because like Blood AMZ is actually pretty. I mean, that's something we talked about earlier with AMZ, is that like how I feel like I know they need to relook at AMZ is because they just randomly made AMZ significantly better for Blood than it did for DPS, and that cannot have been their design intent.
Just like Death Grip.
I guess we have access right here without Wraithwalk with just Death Pact. So basically right here you just have a choice of Death Pact or AMZ, but everything else
Death Pact for Blood is a very bad talent.
Okay, sure. It is a bad talent, isn't it? Dude, look at that. You just be like, most likely end up being overhealing while giving yourself an absorb. Okay,
You're
cool.
better off just death striking for us.
Yep.
Now, what eats up another of the extra talent points for us is Will the Necropolis being 2 talent points down here, and as Blood will pretty much always be taking that unless we're not doing anything particularly challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Then for now, let's just say we're getting A-Bomb Limb. We can go down Rune Mastery to Abomination Limb.
I think Death's Echo for you guys is still pretty situational. It's really nice in like dungeon packs and stuff. I actually wonder if you'll just always play, because Death's Echo is also just way better for Blood than it is for the other specs. I mean, just 2 of the things you're getting charges for just have half the cooldown almost than they have for the DPS variants, right?
And that's a lot easier to pick up now that there's less talent points. We need to invest in the bottom of the tree in general, so it's much easier to throw a utility point in there, where before you actually didn't have nearly as many talent points you could spend after 20.
Yeah.
So that is one of the main notes there. And for Blood on the left side, I guess we go through Horn of Winter down to the bottom of the tree, though our resource situation is in a weird place where we might not even want Horn of Winter unless they make further changes to the Blood talent tree, which they probably will.
Oh yeah, before you were skipping this and just grabbing Runic Attenuation to get down to Empowering Weapon, you were talking about how you had so much generation that you wouldn't even really consider it, and now you're kind of forced into getting it unless you go through the very situational niche blood draw, right?
Which also takes an extra talent point, so I think you just bite the bullet, take Horn of Winter, even if we do end up with an absurd amount of rune regeneration, and call it a day. So this is pretty much the build for all intents and purposes, though again, you can move around some utility points, or you can drop a few points from early on in the Unholy tree, path through Death's Advance to the mid-tier Unholy, and fill out some more utility if you would like.
Yeah, if you don't want Death's Echo, things change really fast. you can get a lot more stuff. Like if you just ignore all this unholy stuff, path down through here, grab like stun for a stop and mythic plus wraith walk, shorter IBF. You've now unlocked the bottom part of the tree. You've alienated yourself from Death's Echo. But look at how many points you now have that are not cursed. You could even drop brittle, grab anti-magic barrier. You could drop enfeeble and grab, blinding sleet. You can, you probably want cleaving strikes. Yeah.
Yeah, that is an option. You could drop those minor throughput options and just go really heavy on the utility.
And then now you still have access to the bottom of a tree. You've alienated Death's Echo, but like you're now kind of sitting pretty with everything you just had, plus a couple points in Unholy Bond.
And at least for blood, Unholy Ground isn't an insignificant throughput increase for all that extra haste. It is worth pointing out. But yeah, you definitely could do something like.
I think this tree still needs a little work, and again, I think we've kind of. Well, I've kind of said what I think about it. What do you guys think this class tree now in this iteration? It appears better than the previous one, certainly with a lot of the middle pathing. But what do you guys think about the what kind of stuff needs to change to make this its final form?
The improved Death Strike movement was probably something that needed to happen, so that was good to see just for the DPS specs, even if Blood didn't necessarily mind picking it up. If Soul Reaper was maybe a little bit more appealing to Frost somehow, or another talent there was universally appealing to all three, maybe that would be a slight improvement.
What can they do to Soul Reaper to make it better for Frost? Generate a lot more runic power?
It's more gameplay conflicts than anything, since it's only one rune cost. You're, generating less runic power for breath. You can never use it during obliteration, so only Spec works well with his ice cap, and nobody's playing ice cap. So, I mean, realistically, the only way they can make it good for Frost is if it generates 20 runic power and somehow works with obliteration.
Yeah, something. I mean, I think it's not off the table that something like that could come, though, right? Because it's not like you can just baseline give an ability that works for other specs and has other integrations, and then just throw it on another spec and expect for it to work. It's possible if they could add some kind of integration to it. Yeah. Dude, I still feel like there's just a lot of stuff here. I guess Lichborn is technically situational, right? But like, maybe the question to ask is this: like, as a Blood Decay going into next expansion, still with this class tree, even though there's a few pathing things that don't really feel great. What do you feel like compared to current Blood Decay, just based on class tree and like the decisions you have to make and what you're losing on here versus what you're gaining?
It's hard to say just because the Blood talent tree has so much of an influence in the answer to that question, and the Blood tree is responsible for a lot of distortion going on. But I do like the general structure of this tree and the decisions it is giving us, and what it is giving us, other than perhaps a little bit too much rune regeneration, unless they figure out a way for us to live with that much rune regeneration in a way that our rotation doesn't feel clunky. But
I mean, just looking at a very binary situation, obviously you have the option of Death's Echo, but it seems like you're gaining Empowerment Weapon, Icy Talons, and Horn of Winter, basically, outside of things that don't really super interact with you and are just tuning based, and you're losing, shorter kick via Conduit. You're losing Lichborn in a lot of situations. You're losing Control Undead. That's another thing that's like pretty relevant in some dungeons that is just going to lose you a point you kind of care about, right?
The short answer is that we lose a lot of this situational utility, and instead we gain a lot of rune regeneration that we just don't have baseline right now, and resource regeneration in general.
I still think the DK tree as well is very, very throughput heavy in general, or just big important button heavy, to where a lot of other class trees don't have this, where like you guys are talking about whether you kind of want, what's a tree that had this happen recently? I mean, we just did the monk trees the other day, so I'll just use that as an example. When you path down their tree, even though there were huge pathing issues that I think will get solved, you were able to kind of go down, get everything you currently have, some stuff you haven't had before, and you were able to, like the power level increases, but when you finish the tree and you kind of get everything you want, you were able to go back up and be like, oh, am I going to need this for this fight? Am I going to need this for this fight? Do I need an extra charge of roll here? Do I need a little extra damage? Do I need chi burst? There were actual decisions and like raid utility kind of stuff, not as well as other classes, but if you added like a couple of 3 to 4 points, you'd definitely just be choosing between things like Tiger Tail Sweep or, a different like potentially like defensive or offensive capstone node, Black Ox statue. Where you guys, when you're talking about, okay, I'm done, I've gone through the build and I got everything I need, like these big buttons like Dampen Harm Diffuse for you guys, IBF, Empower Room Weapon, A-Bombs Limb, all this stuff that's really powerful. Your things that you want for a specific situation are not always 1 point away. It seems like you have to kind of go down a long line of things to get stuff you kind of want for a scenario instead of it just being that 1 point option you slot in. Like the most successful class trees, and there's not just one of them currently, have you get everything you want, and then you have 3 to 5 points to play with based on the scenario, and you can kind of just toss them around very easily, and you never have to path through something that feels bad to get something that you might need. The DK tree doesn't accomplish that even still, I think. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
I think the main area where that might be a problem is just early on the Unholy column, but other than that, I do think you are able to flex into a lot of these 1 or 2 point talent picks with little trouble.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely think this thing that I'm just hovering right now is just still the biggest problem with this tree. But overall, it's a good one. It's an above average class tree, especially with these changes. I just think it could definitely be better, and that's the point of giving feedback, right? All right, so now let's hop off of Blood for a bit. We are now going full Unholy. So Kyrasis, thank you for hopping on real quick.
No problem. Have fun.
Yep. All right. Did you link me the Unholy thing, Taeznak?
Just did.
All right. So this is a big conversation. We don't even have to like even start pathing down the tree yet. What do you think of the changes that were posted today?
Oh god, there's so much. There's a lot of really cool stuff. Most of it really, really good. Stuff like Plague Bearer, that festering wound transferring talent is just insane for AoE. Doesn't help the situation in single target with wounds, but still really good. Overall, I think it's a move in the right direction. Really big move in the right direction.
So let me actually read out that not yet implemented talent for people who were not here when I talked about it earlier or did not read it themselves. It's a new talent on a 45-second cooldown that costs the same runic power as Epidemic, I believe. And it inflicts diseases upon your enemies, and it spreads festering wounds equal to the amount currently active on your target to 8 nearby enemies. So it wouldn't even be bad gameplay either. Like, for example, you just like slam a couple festerings on a target and that you hopefully, well, unless you were dragging one into a pull, and then you would just press this as a runic power spender, so you wouldn't be like rune starved to do it. It would kind of work, and then yeah, that's gonna pop off big time, especially because you have Festermite built into your kit. So you're just having guaranteed no RNG pet generation fat ass Festermites on AoE pulls pretty consistently. That is going to be very fun to play.
It is. My only minor issue with this is 8 targets. Bursting Swords is 8 targets. Scourge Strike is 5 targets. There's this weird disconnect in the target cap for the Bursting Sword setup.
Very true. Because like even in a scenario where you aren't just or when you're popping wounds, right? You're like putting down D&D and popping wounds. If you put it out on 8 targets, it's going to be clearing them all differently. This is also, I wonder if they'll even have time in this alpha to iterate on their target cap philosophy, because I think it's changed so much. Like they have gone through like hell and back. They have sought out God for their idea on AoE caps. They went from like fully capping it to square rooting some stuff to like uncapping it, but then like coming up, that used to be 5, but now a lot of things are just kind of baseline capped at 8. So they were like, AoE capping is still good. It's just at 8 instead of 5, but it's not like a hard cap. It like falls off after that. I think Unholy is just in this weird middle ground where they haven't fully figured it out yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Scourge Strike and Bursting Swords is a really weird one to do too, due to the quadratic scaling. Like you up it to 8 and you're like doubling the damage it does, not 30% more like you'd expect. So it does get a bit crazy, but that talent's really interesting. Breaking off Magus the Dead, also really interesting. So many cool interactions in the tree too. But it does bring up one other concern I have. There's a lot of Death Coil interactions now. I'm sure you saw reading the post. Stuff like Death Rot, all of those. None of them really affect Epidemic, which kind of leaves it in this awkward spot where you're almost incentivized too much to press Death Coil that you never really want to press Epidemic, even at higher target counts.
Maybe a solution to that, and this, you kind of felt this way last expansion too. Like if you're playing like a fight where you had to Epidemic instead of Death Coil, it made that legendary feel a bit worse, and just in general, like reducing the cooldown of your stuff, it just felt bad in a way to Epidemic. I wonder how much worse the class design would be if they just made most things that reduce things on your class with Death Coil just straight up work with Epidemic, but obviously in a lesser sense because it costs more. Actually, does it currently cost more with the new change?
Nope, they cost the same amount.
They are the same now, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I wonder if they could look at that.
Yeah, I mean, even just adding Epidemic to Death Rot, and when you Death Coil dot talent. Just those two alone would give you so much incentive to press Epidemic, and it creates this really interesting gameplay loop too, where you're setting up for your bursting swords in AOE. If you're pressing Epidemic just right, you're getting that shadow damage increase in Death Rot, which is just above Festermind if you want to hover over it for chat. But you're getting that shadow damage increase for Epidemic, and you're feeding into that bursting swords window and rewarding you for spending your runic power well. It's a really interesting dichotomy it could make.
Also, Super Strain being brought back. I don't know how you feel about this. Because, like, obviously Morbidity is, like, a new thing, and it's very powerful. I think they also said that they're nerfing Morbidity, right?
Yeah, Morbidity's getting nerfed, but it's already got 5 things that are considered dots that it works with when we consider Super Strain. So I don't think even with the nerf that it's going to be bad by any means. So I'm okay with Super Strain, even more so when we consider the new Plaguebringer talent. That increasing your dot tick rate is kind of insane because it says 150%, and well, we
You
were
have
doing
3 dots.
yeah, we were doing some testing earlier because it's a copy of a Torghast power, and it brings the 3-second dot tick timer down to 1.2 seconds and leaves the duration alone.
Okay. Oh, so, okay, when I read this earlier, I was thinking it would kind of have a similar interaction to, like, how Ebon Fever worked. But you're saying that it's just going to make it do damage more quickly, but not actually reduce the total overall ticks on the actual spell. I feel like that could just be a change.
Well, Ebon Fever still exists in the tree, which is where things get even more interesting. You can actually reduce Plague's tick rate down to 0.6.
Wait, is it actually there? I don't see it.
Left side with bursting swords.
Oh, yeah, it is there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah, you could have like more than 100 ticks per minute of your dot, which also helps brittle in the general talent tree.
Something else I saw too. So Rotten Touch. I think sudden doom procs have just been so interesting for Unholy over a period of time, because it's felt bad and good. You're fiending for them like an oasis in the desert outside of your cooldowns with low haste early in the expansion. But during your cooldowns, sometimes you can get so many procs that it feels like you can't spend it fast enough, and you're either capping on runes or runic power, and both of those don't feel good. What they've changed here is that they've kind of made Sudden Doom into encourage a little bit more of weaving. So a potential talent that makes it so you might want to get a bit of like Scourge Strikes off in the actual duration. We don't know if it'll pandemic or just increase if you use 2 in a row, for example. But something that kind of occurred to me is it doesn't really solve that problem and kind of creates a few others. For example, of like wanting to pool. So when you get a Sudden Doom, when you're in the oasis in the desert situation, you can have an actual decent amount of Scourge Strikes to throw into that buff, for example. What do you think about that?
I think the Oasis situation is going to happen way more now with all the resource generation we get in the general tree. But Holy's never had access to that many resources at that extent. So those, cooldown periods where you're flooded on resources, that's going to be pretty much all the time if you take all of that, which you probably will, just because you kind of need all of it to set up for Gargoyle without ripping your hair out.
Speaking of Gargoyle, let's get into Gargoyle. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so they turned this into Old Dark Arbiter, right? But the thing is, it's based on runic power spent, and it's not. This is not saying it's different than the way Old Gargoyle worked, just or Arbiter, but it kind of presents a very interesting opener situation where I'll actually pull it up on my screen, where
Yep. I'm the one that made that post.
yeah, so you're outbreaking at the beginning of the pull, you're festering striking if you don't have A-Bomb's Limb talented twice in a row, and then you are Scourge Striking, leaving yourself without runes. And then now you're waiting 4 or 6 seconds based on your talent choice on your opener with Lust up at the beginning of a pull. You're Horn of Wintering, and then you are Scourge Striking to get again back up to just because you're burst. And if everyone doesn't know why you're doing this, you're basically just getting yourself to RP cap before you ever cast Gargoyle and making sure things are coming back off cooldown so you can actually get the most out of this damage CD. And then basically at like Gargoyle at potentially 16 seconds into the fight, you're now just a runic power spending machine, and then you finally get to do your damage. And Unholy is already a class that's had such an issue with being able to ramp instantly on the pull and kind of just having a bunch of things going on and a ton of GCDs. This just seems like that, but made a lot worse. What are your thoughts on it?
Oh man, I mean, I'm the one that made that post. I'm the one who mapped all that out, and man, I will tell you it was a headache. So there's a lot to break down here, but I like that Gargoyle is a very interactive pet pool. I really love it. that part should really stay. It's just the setup part that's really painful. With all the runic power generation talents we have in the general tree, it does make it easier because, I mean, you saw it could be up to 16 seconds if you don't take those, but taking them does help a little bit, brings it down to 12. I don't know. They kind of need to give it the breath treatment where they give it some resources on use so you don't have to pool nearly as much. Something like 40, 50 runic power on use just to reduce that pooling time.
Yeah. Also, I wonder, is it like, this is just total bomb cloud. I'm just making this up. But is part of the issue with how long this takes on the opener the fact that Gargoyle only is interacting with runic power spent instead of having some kind of rune integration? Like, I'm just totally making this up, but couldn't you balance it in some way to where spending runes and runic power also buffs your Gargoyle at a similar rate, so you're not popping it so late into the pull and you have instant like uptime on it with the big or from the beginning of Lust?
That would kind of work. You're still running into a situation where you still got like 17 cooldowns you got to set up and try to execute and try to get the timings just right.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example, like Festermite. It's a 20-second buff. Gargoyle's 30 seconds. You want it to overlap the end of Gargoyle perfectly, so Festermite's buffed the most when Gargoyle's buffed the most. So even at that point, you're still not pressing Apocalypse.
Oh, wow.
Start your window until 10 seconds into Gargoyle.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. Not only are you building RP before the thing, you're not even spending your or popping your first wound until that late into the pull, just so your 20-second Festermite window lasts. You don't spend a single wound in the entire fight until Gargoyle's been out for 10 seconds.
Not quite. I did put a Scourge Strike in there at 4.5 seconds. And you'll notice Apocalypse at 24.5 seconds, exactly 20 seconds later. So that creates the perfect overlap. So your first Festermite's basically just a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, okay, so this isn't good. But
It's cursed.
Yeah, this is very cursed. What are your potential solutions for this? Without what are the easiest solutions?
Remove Army, Gargoyle, and Dark Transformation from the global cooldown. That reduces your setup time, or reduces your GC load a little bit. And then just give Gargoyle some resources on use so you don't have to spend as many global setting it up.
Oh,
that
okay.
should the only other change that would kind of need to be made is reducing Gargoyle's duration down to 20 or 25 seconds, so you don't have that time of biding your time before the Festermite window. But otherwise, it's not that hard of a change to fix.
Let's talk about some of the other stuff. So that opener is really cursed, and there's really not a lot of tuning they could do to really change that. Just the way that Gargoyle works and Festermite works. It's just you're kind of adding in two things that have existed in two different parts of WoW with different cooldown timings. I think that's maybe just something to focus on in general. Is just aligning the philosophies of the target cap with the class and also the cooldown durations, because those are just from two different eras, right? And they need to be merged together.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if we look at Dark Transformation, how they said they wanted to, align all the cooldowns. We still have that weird situation where if you don't take Unholy Command, you're still stuck with a 60-second Dark Transformation cooldown. It's still not aligning, so you're forced into that 2-pointer, which doesn't exactly feel great.
I could also feel like later summon Gargoyles are going to be super hard to set up in the middle of a fight, because if anything changes and you're off the boss for a specific window, and you ever move one of your Festermite windows back or forward 10 seconds, you're delaying your cooldowns and not pressing buttons to make sure that lines up properly, and that just seems like an insane amount of micromanagement in an actual encounter.
Exactly, yeah, which is why a 20-second Gargoyle would be way better.
Yeah, I mean, even then though, I still feel like that presents the same issue, right?
Oh, it does. I mean, you're holding Gargoyle for 5-10 seconds or whatever to align with Festermite, but I don't know if it's that big of an issue if you're not pressing Gargoyle and then biding your time before you start another Festermite window,
It seems like they added this in a certain part of the tree called Ruptured Viscera, where your ghouls expire, they explode into Viscera, dealing shadow damage to nearby enemies. I guess this is kind of an idea of them splitting the tree into pet stuff and non-pet stuff. This just seems like a way for if you're spawning a bunch of ghouls, you're just doing passive AoE with it, kind of.
Yeah, so it's actually a copy of an old Legion artifact trait and a BFA Azerite trait.
Okay.
Portal of Underworld and Last Surprise. It's actually on the node below Apocalypse, which is shared with Magus of the Dead, both of which basically are buffs to Gargoyle or not Gargoyle, Apocalypse or Army. So just above Army, just below Apocalypse, if you wanted to hover over
Oh,
it.
I see. Magus. Okay.
Yeah, but that's going to be shared on that node. So both of those are Apocalypse or Army buffing things. It works pretty well. It doesn't exactly split the tree because it's shared node between the two.
Hmm.
But
Uh,
yeah, the tree is very split. The right side's very pet focused. The left side's very disease focused, which is a great change.
yeah, it's an excellent change. That's like the two competing philosophies. I would also just love, in general, for it just to feel. I guess maybe Festermite is solving the problem of like feeling good about pressing wounds. Festermite is that when you're popping wounds, you're getting incrementally stronger. I just, I don't know. We were having this issue. Do you have any thoughts about this at all? We were having this issue with Windwalker. People were like talking about adding really cool things to the class, and like Feline Stomp is one of them, where you are having the class that probably has as much or more going on in melee in a lot of scenarios than other specs do, especially with the amount of active buttons you have to keep track of and like do properly. And it's also like you're gonna okay, so this is the class where you're gonna keep the Covenant ability that no one's mained for a while, by the way. It was never the best Covenant this expansion, even though it was good. And you're gonna make them also need to stand on their Feline to reset their cooldowns on top of all of that. That's just like kind of added complexity to a class that doesn't need it. I just wonder how they're gonna deal with Festermite in that way. If it's just becoming like a massive cooldown class, like I'm sure you've like had this happen. I loved playing Unholy DK in it was the Reaping season and 2 seasons after it. Just Unholy DK was super fun in BFA. But like that feeling of like accidentally popping a wound like at the wrong time, knowing that like you're going into a massive AoE pool with like 10 seconds left on your Festermite and you're just totally ruining your burst and ramp. You know what I mean? I wonder if that combined with having to line that up with other cooldowns is just going to cause maybe a not fun gameplay loop.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you have like those situations where a pox coming off cooldown, you're like, oh, I got to get this going. You hit it, and then you realize, oh, I just popped 4 wounds on a 1 second left Festermite. That kind
Yep.
of sucks.
Yeah, exactly. I love personally, I love Festermite. I just know that it might turn a lot of players off to have that kind of interaction actually happening.
But sorry, I was just gonna say, yeah, where it's placed on the tree does kind of give you the option to go away from it, as long as the other options are up to snuff with it. With how big of a buff it is, though, I struggle to believe that any of the others are really going to compete. You're probably always going to take Festermite.
Still don't take Unholy Assault, unfortunately.
No, that
Dude,
doesn't belong in a capstone spot. It needs to be reverted to Unholy Frenzy for the love of all that is unholy.
yeah, literally. And also the new talent Commander of the Dead. This is a big number. Popping drunk or having Dark Transformation active also makes your Gargoyle and Army of the Dead for 30 seconds, increasing their damage by 40%.
Yeah,
That is fat.
yeah. So this is insane. It's a copy of the old Legion Legendary shoulders that Unholy used to wear, except back then I think it only lasted 20 seconds. Anyways, it's a copy of that, but it's really, really good. Gives you some agency on when you want to use your cooldowns. Really leads you into this right sequencing of Army, Gargoyle, Dark Transformation, always in that order. It also feeds in very well with the other new talent. What's it called? Eternal Agony, where it increases the cooldown of your or duration of your Dark Transformation by 1 second for every death point. So you're going into your Gargoyle window, you're pressing DT right after, and then you're spamming death coils like your life depends on it. Buffing Gargoyle, but also extending Dark Transformation. So you're kind of playing too many games at once.
I wonder if there's anything else that they added that is like very significant. Oh, what do you think about the maximum runic power talent?
It adds 2 more globals to our openers, so both good and bad, because 1 extra death coil for Gargoyle, but also 2 more globals.
I've just noticed that in a lot of trees, having the runic power, having points that increase your bar is they don't really feel as powerful compared to other things that you have. It just doesn't feel very good. But obviously for like DK, when you're pooling for a giant gargoyle, it has like a lot more value than just, going through the motions of making sure you don't cap and you're spending your resources properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a fine talent for a 2-pointer. It's all right. Like, you'll probably take it. It's not like, woo about it or anything, though.
Okay, so you've gone all the way down here. I guess we don't have to really go through too much of the decision making other than it seems like, so you're skipping. They have Epidemic fully skippable. They have, oh, I like this. Wait, was this always been a thing, replenishing wounds?
That was the thing in the previous tree, yeah. You could reset it and go through it yourself if you want, just to
No,
kind of
that's
explore.
Yeah, it's probably okay. I just like I'm kind of thinking of like a lot of the pathing stuff they put in the tree because this is so different. Like before, Epidemic was on like the right, for example. So now it's like all the way on the left with like the non-pet side. This is like just you, but they have the tangent nodes not really necessarily affecting them. I feel like that's also gonna feel good too. Like going in with 0 RP, putting up your 2 festering strikes, instantly pressing your AoE wound button, and then when you're like building up Epidemic and you're popping so many wounds, maybe this is actually so much that you'll runic power cap in AoE, like a lot more than you do currently, when you're like at least death striking in your D&D or scourge striking. Sorry.
Yeah, probably is enough to cause that. But we kind of already did that anyway. Like bursting swords is going to be the priority always during D&D. So like you're going to overcap runic power either way.
I noticed you didn't take reaping, which is it really possible to get that without sacrificing a lot? That's like the new thing this on this talent tree that makes you just an insane execute class. They're like doubling. I think they gave you this because they gave Soul Reaper to the other 2 specs. They were like, the other 2 specs can get Soul Reaper, but we are still the like primary execute option.
So it's not too much to grab it. You could give up Magus or the Ghoul Explosion talent, which is just below Apocalypse, to grab it. I felt like Magus was probably going to be a more sustainable option, but Reaping's probably better for those execute fights. So you don't have to give up a whole lot. So it's overall really great placement. I'm still upset that stuff like Pestilent Pustules, Pestilence, and Harbinger of Doom are still in the tree, though. If I'm being entirely honest, these talents are just like, they've been so dead for so long. Come on, guys.
Oh yeah, I think these made a lot more sense when it seemed like they were going hard down the Death Coil avenue, and they're just like, okay, Death Coil cleaves now. But it's like, dude, like imagine Unholy feeling good with you just spending runic power and that being where like a ton of your damage is coming from. Like that's just like the least, that's the low hanging fruit, right? That's not what you want to be powerful. That is the filler.
Yeah. And granted, what I've made for the tree that you're seeing is mostly just my best guess, but I'm pretty sure Death Coil Cleave is still in the tree. It's the 2-point node to the bottom left of Apocalypse. The one that kind of looks like a rushing skull in the
Oh yeah,
image.
and you do still have that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what that is. So I'm pretty sure we'll still have Death Coil Cleave. That and Death Rot, like I said, kind of deprioritizes Epidemic a whole lot. But yeah,
Dude,
I mean,
I love this pathing though. The pathing is so good.
oh yeah, you can kind of move wherever you want, create whatever build you want. And the build I sent you is kind of like a hybrid, like single target does really good single target burst, but also does pretty dang good AoE too, at least in cleave. Like, should be pretty good. Like for a more AoE specific situation, you'd probably swap out Clawing Shadows for the wound, or not wound, sorry, disease tick rate talent, because that's on the same node. So
Oh yeah, yeah. That's
really easy change there.
I want this choice node's interesting to me. I feel like Clawing Shadows, the choice is, okay, I need like, I need to have the ability to spend runes from range often on this fight. Think about Denathri as Clawing Shadows. Like, it was so good in so many scenarios. But then you're choosing something that's like, it's not really the opposite decision of that. I guess it's just, it's not as much a tuning thing as much as like, I feel like you're going to be kind of forced to play Plaguebringer and you're not really going to ever really consider Clawing Shadows. Like, the loss would be too big potentially.
Probably, yeah. I think the reason they put them both there is because they're both augments to Scourge Strike, which I do get that aspect of it, but both of them need to be looked at tuning-wise to make sure that they're competitive, at least when you don't take Super Strain, because, I mean, Plaguebringer is always going to win with Super Strain anyway.
What else? Okay, so I think we covered everything that was new here.
I think so?
It's a big change, man. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
as with most other classes, like you're gonna want to log in and just immediately play it on Tuesday. But I think usually a lot of the like new stuff, the not yet implemented stuff, it's just missing like 1 or 2 things where you can't like really fully play it. But dude, playing this in AoE sounds insane. I cannot wait to do that. I just want to do like a full AoE. I just want to be a full AoE blaster. Wonder how I could do that. Let me think of an AoE build.
Build it out, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna be an AoE gamer.
Yeah, I mean, when you messaged me like right after the tree went live, and you're like, "Hey, big DK talk tomorrow," I'm like, "Oh crap, I got to think about all of this stuff in that time." Max, are you crazy?
Yeah.
Putting the pressure on me to figure all this out.
Infected claws. Yeah, but it's good though. That's the good shit. I'm an AoE lord. Let's see. Pestilence is down here. Oh yeah, dude. Pestilent pustules. Yup. We're AoEing. Bursting swords. Yup. Pestilence. What is this one? Oh, yup. Plague Bearer. I wonder what else you spend points on to even unlock the bottom part. Do you think you'd still grab Gargoyle in like a full 8? I think you would. Which
If you're going for funnel, yeah.
Cooldown of Dark Transformation has value, Eternal Agony, and then just go like Army, Death Rot, Fester Might, and then you kind of just do the bottom stuff the same. I think this is like too good to not have. I noticed that you didn't have or no, wait, now we can grab what? Morbidity or Army of the Damned.
You'd probably actually drop the pet damage increase for the far right capstone and grab Super Strand for full AoE memes, going through Morbidity with Gargoyle.
Oh yeah, there we go.
So you're just doing constant, just massive AoE damage.
I'm doing this on Alpha next week. This is me.
You got to swap out to Plaguebringer from Claw and Shadows, though. You need that node with Super Strand, man.
Oh, Plaguebringer? Oh yeah, what can I lose? Replenishing Wounds kind of stinks. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't get rid of it because of this program, but yeah, you just take out Replenishing Wounds. They've allowed you to path around it, which is good. Then you just slammed Plaguebringer. Whoo! All right.
Yeah, it's going to slap an AoE, man. I can't wait.
Yeah, fuck yeah. All right, cool. I think that's about it, man. It's been
thanks for having the chat.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for talking, man. All right, I'm gonna head out.
Have a good day. Ciao.
You too, bud. Love talking to you. See ya.